All right, so let's get some just regular items of business out of the way. When you guys logged in, hopefully you selected call in with computer, and what that will do is that will enable your sound. Uh, you'll click connect to, oh, whoops, I'm pushing the wrong button. There we go. Connect audio and video. That will get you started on that. Check the volume of your speakers so that way they're not too loud or too soft and you guys can hear me. Also, I want you to select the chat box if you could for me, and I know a couple of you already did this to check sound for me, so thank you. Make sure you have all participants or all attendees from the drop-down menu. That way, as everybody's replying to questions that we have, you guys will see what other people are answering in those questions that we have. So all attendees would be perfect, or all participants. And then if you could please for me, mute your microphones or cell phones if you happen to be calling in. That way we won't get any feedback, or sometimes there's a lot of echo with that. All right, let's get started. So this is me. My name's Linda Burrows, and I am the K-12 Social Studies and World Languages Specialist. I've taught public school here in Arizona for 20 years. I've taught grades 7 through 12, never elementary school, but you can see I've got 2 kids there. My daughter is a junior, but she is graduating early from the University of Arizona, and my son is a freshman at Arizona State. And so we are empty nesters and enjoying life as far as that goes. And I also worked on the standards committee for 2 years helping to write the new standards. So what I would like for you guys to do right now, if you could for me in the chat box, if you could introduce yourself, who you are, what your current position is. Are you teaching? Are you an academic coach? Are you an administrator? And then how familiar are you with the new standards? Give yourself a number if you could please for me. So 1, you know them forwards and backwards. 2, you are somewhat comfortable with them. 3, you know them a little bit. Or 4, you don't know them at all. So if you can just take a minute to introduce yourself in that chat box, I'd appreciate it. And we'll see kind of, that gives me a gauge of where everybody is. Great, so we've got 3rd grade, 1st grade, 7th and 8th grade, social studies. Oh, perfect. Good, we're going to be talking about reading and writing as well. So that's fantastic that you're interested in that. Prescott Valley, very nice, enjoying the cooler weather. Oh, perfect. You'll have to check out the recorded webinar for 6 through 8 if you didn't happen to attend that one. Great. So it looks like we've got kind of a good mix. So this is just a real quick, just kind of introduction overview to the standards, and hopefully you guys will feel a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable with them and using them once we get done with this. So let's go ahead and start. Let's see here. All right, so for today, what I'd like to do is, 1, just examine the new standards, looking at what they are, how they're a little bit different than the old standards. understanding the shifts in these new standards, because there are a lot of changes, especially in the K-8 realm. As far as how that goes, inquiry is now a really big part of our standards, and so we're going to kind of introduce you guys to that a little bit. Talk about the implementation timeline, especially for a K-6, to kind of mind the gaps so that way students and their content knowledge doesn't fall through. I'd also like to especially show how to integrate social studies and ELA. With the marginalization of social studies and you guys being so pressed for time at an elementary level, I want to make sure to show you ways in which you can use social studies to kind of teach your ELA classes or ELA sections. So that way it adds social studies becomes a great complement or supplement to your ELA classes, and you're not feeling overwhelmed that way. And then I also want to give you guys some other resources to use in your classrooms, and then open it up to any last minute questions that you may have. So first of all, I want you to understand that I know that teaching elementary is hard. Like I said, I have never taught elementary school. So I found this great video that I'm going to share with you guys of what I think elementary is like. So I'll watch this here. Get the chat box out of the way. Go ahead and push play. Okay, so that is my idea of how tough it is for you guys to teach elementary school. So let me go back and share. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Go back and share my PowerPoint. So elementary is hard, and trying to cram social studies in with all these new standards, and they're broad, is a little intimidating. So I really would like for you guys to hopefully get a good idea of what really we have to offer and how we can help you guys in this. So what I'd like for you guys to do right now is to type your concerns into the chat box for me of what are some of the hesitations and anxieties that you guys are feeling with your with the standards as it is right now. So if you can take a minute and do that for me. Yeah, Jerry Brooks cracks me up. He is so funny. And just in a minute, that tells me exactly what what it must be like. Good. So resources for students to access at appropriate at their reading level. That I think is a huge concern for elementary teachers too. Any other concerns that anyone is having with regards to the new standards? breaking them down into understandable parts, reading levels huge, finding activities. That's hard, especially because at an elementary level, you guys are the ultimate in being a generalist. You have to know a little bit about everything. And for many of you, social studies was not something that you took many, many classes in. And so it is very intimidating, especially I think the economics portion of it. So hopefully I can give you guys some resources to uh, alleviate that and give you guys some great lessons that you can do. And then the time issue is really is tough too. All right, let's move on with the standards. These are some of the things that I came up with as I was thinking of, questions and concerns that I would have if I were an elementary students. How did they change? Why did they change? What does it mean to your classrooms? Is there any state assessment aligned to it, especially because you guys have so much testing with it? And then again, probably the biggest time is how can I teach the standards when you already have to devote so much time to ELA and to math. So hopefully we'll be able to address these and alleviate some of your concerns. So when we look at the new social studies standards at a K-6 level, they are focused on inquiry and questions. And I'll give you some really quick, easy ways that you can hit these inquiry kinds of lessons that totally meet the standards and you can get it done quickly and it's not going to be this huge impediment time-wise. They also are very broad, and that allows you the flexibility, especially at a local level where maybe you live in a city where they've got some great festival that's coming up, and maybe there's a way you can incorporate that into the standards, and that would be fantastic, and we totally recommend that. Also, for the first time, and this is what I'm excited about, both as more of a secondary teacher and honestly as a parent having had my children go through public school, is this progression of skills in topics from K-12. So no longer is it this random kind of hodgepodge all over the place in elementary school. You now see a very clear progression from K to 1, 2, 3, building with each level. They get more in depth with their skills and more in depth with the content too. And that I think is fantastic and it'll help students learn. What the new standards are not. The new standards are no longer a checklist of items that students must memorize. So it's not something that is, I call it like a one and done kind of thing, where you talked about that person, you talked about that civilization, okay, we did the New England colonies, check it, we're done. They're not like that at all anymore. You're going to be using these standards multiple times in the course of a year as you do different units. And so that's something that's very different from before. They also are not inflexible. They really do allow you to adapt them to your personal teaching style and the needs of your kids, and I think that is a fantastic change going forward. And then the last thing, the K-6, all of the social studies standards they were not written to be standalone standards. They are very, very purposefully written to incorporate all of the social studies fields, so economics, civics, history, and geography, but they also are written to incorporate purposefully with ELA and also with other standards too. So when you look at the new science standards, a lot of their cross-cutting principles and concepts and processes that they have are exactly like our inquiry ones. They're just tweaked a little bit for the content being different. So for an elementary class, your social studies standards include a couple of different things. One, it includes the course considerations, or at the elementary level, we call these the storylines. The storylines they're the topics that you have to teach. And I asked you guys to print out the one-pagers of your standards for your grade level that you teach, and those would be the bullets at the top of those one-pagers. If you haven't printed them out, if you can pull them up on your computer, if you just go out and Google Arizona Social Studies Standards, and you click the Standards at a Glance button, and then click the grade that you want the PDF to look at them, and storylines are the bullets or just the topics. And it's really the general idea. It's not, again, this checklist of everything you have to do after the fact. It's just that main idea, which I'm going to show you that specifically. And then we have discipline disciplinary skills and processes standards. These are content standards that deal specifically with inquiry. They talk about looking at things like cause and effect, chronology, uh, evidence-based arguments. This is where it ties really well to ELA with your claim, evidence, and reasoning. That's all in there for our disciplinary skills and processes. And then we have more content specific. So you've got civics, which is government, economics, geography, and history standards. So when you are creating your units, you're going to pull from all of those pieces to create a unit that integrates into your elementary school classrooms. So what are the anchor standards? So the anchor standards are the overarching ideas and concepts that we want kids to get to by the time they graduate high school. So this is this kind of piece of the puzzle, this gradual progression that students are not expected to master all of these by the time they leave elementary school. It's by the time they leave high school. And so we have 5 categories. Again, disciplinary skills and processes, which that's our inquiry, which deals with chronology and historical thinking. You've got disciplinary thinking, talking about multiple perspectives and events and issues. Then you've got the SP3, which is thinking like a historian, thinking like a geographer, thinking like an economist, and answering these questions. And then lastly, the SP4 is analyzing relationships among cause and effect and using then those arguments too. Then we have civics, economics, geography, and history. All of them have just 4 basic overarching anchor standards with the exception of economics. Economics has 5, and the reason for that is we wanted to make sure that we put first and foremost at the front, E1 is our financial literacy. We knew the state was coming up with a law that mandated financial literacy education K-12, and so we wanted to make sure that we were ahead of the game, and so they are already in our standards, and the new standards already meet that legislation that came out at the end of last year. So each grade level, so you have your anchor standards here that you see, but underneath those anchor standards are where we get our grade level specific standards. So when kids are asked to analyze things at a kindergarten level, at a 4th grade level, or if they're in a high school level, they are still analyzing, but they're doing it in a grade level appropriate setting. And this is where they all kind of work together as cogs in a larger machine, where you're just going to pull little pieces from it. And I have an activity that I'm going to show you guys how you'll see this to be able to do it. So this shows the progression of the storylines that we have for K-6. So starting with kindergarten, we looked at just children as citizens, just those little guys, how they relate in the classroom and what does it mean to be a citizen. Then it grows to be a community living and working together. The 2nd grade standards get to talk, the subject storyline is all about the world around me, which can be their community, it could be their school, it could be bigger. It also, we had it be broad like that because 2nd grade reading programs specifically have, each school can get different reading programs, and a lot of them are tied to places around the world. So this is where you could pair ELA and social studies. So if you're reading maybe a myth or a fable from ancient China called Lan Po Po, right? The Little Red Riding Hood in Chinese. You can talk about some Chinese history and Chinese geography and, you know, what kind of economic system does China have? Is it the same as ours? And there's a lot that you can tie with that. Then it goes from the world around these guys to 3rd grade is Arizona Studies. So we get a little bit bigger where we're talking about our state. Then we get a little bit bigger in 4th grade talking about the regions and cultures of the Americas. And then 5th grade is getting specifically to U.S. studies. 6th grade is then global studies, looking at world regions and cultures of the Eastern Hemisphere up to about the 1600s. And then 7th grade would then build upon that with global studies, but now you're bringing in U.S. as part of that. And then 8th grade is kind of that capstone year where kids take all of the things they've learned and now do something with it, trying to kind of channel that crazy hormonal 8th grade energy into something positive and good. So here's an example of 4th grade. This this would be the storyline. And so it's the fourth grade regions and cultures of the Americas. And you see these bullets here that I've circled in red. These are the main topics, or you could make them as units and tie two different things you do in your ELA classes. Again, it's not like you have to do all of the things in the bullet, but the general idea. So for example, if you look at the third bullet down where it says American Indian life in Americas prior to European exploration, that's all you have to cover, right? Is just American Indian life in the Americas prior to. It doesn't mean you have to include the peoples of the Southwest, Pacific Northwest, nomadic nations of the Great Plains, and the woodland peoples of the East Mississippi River. That's great if you want to include all of those, but it's not mandatory. As long as you get American Indian life in the Americas prior to European contact, if you only talk about the Southwest, but you've covered it in depth, then you're good. You don't have to do everything in there. And so that's something to keep and note. So these are the topics and ideas that you would create units around. So real quick, I just want you to think, we've looked at the anchor standards. What is the most notable thing that stands out to you so far about the anchor standards or the progressions, or as you're looking at your storylines? If you guys can type that into the chat box, I'll give you a couple of minutes here. I do. I agree with you guys. The progression makes it so much easier to follow, that the kids will be growing from grade levels. And that really is the reasoning why we had to move Arizona studies from fourth grade to third grade. And I know that was really controversial. A lot of teachers were not happy with us. Uh, but if you really look at the bigger picture of that expanding view of our children, we really needed to have Arizona go to third grade. And honestly, fourth grade had all of that regional Native American, indigenous population stuff in it anyways, but no one was able to get to it because there was so much Arizona stuff. So actually this kind of frees that up a little bit, so that way you still can cover indigenous people of Arizona. So there is some Arizona studies that you can do in fourth grade that still ties to maybe tours to the Capitol Museum because they have Native American things there, going to the Heard Museum. So there are still opportunities for that. And again, fourth grade now also does that colonial stuff, so that way fifth grade can get more in depth. So here's what I'd like for you guys to do, and this is where I'm going to try to help you guys put this all together, because I totally agree with you when you first look at these, whoever said that they looked a little messy. Taking out your one-pager, I want you to look at the top where you have the bullets, and I want you to pick just one bullet on that, and just think of that as like a unit you're going to create. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then underneath your one-pager, you're going to see all of the say you teach fifth grade, so it'd be 5.sp 1.2, 5.sp, which those are the skills and processes, inquiry standards. Then you'll see the 5.h, the 5.c, which are history and civics, then the 5.g, geography, and the 5.e for economics. So those are all the ones that kind of break those anchor standards down into grade level appropriate things that, as the teachers in elementary school were writing these, felt that yes, fifth graders are capable of doing this. And so what I'd like for you to do is take that top bullet, take 5 minutes, and then if you pick a topic, think of how many standards you could apply into that bullet. So let me show you like an example real quick on this. So if this is the 7th grade, topics for these are the course considerations. So say we pick revolutions here as a topic, and you could see you could cover the American, the French, the Russian, the Cultural Revolution, Latin American revolutions, tons of revolutions, right? So under just revolutions, then go and you see all of your standards here. Go through and just pick out which ones you think you could apply to a unit on that particular topic. So if I was going through, say, 7th grade, I can create compelling questions based on, dealing with revolutions. I'll look at multiple sources. All of the civic standards talk about revolutions. I can apply all those. I can apply some economics when revolutions. So take a minute right now and do that in your for your particular grade level. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then add them up, and when you get done, go ahead and type your answer into the chat box for me. So just a couple more minutes. So as you're looking at it from the bullet, count up how many you've got that you think you could apply to your particular topic that you pick. Okay, it looks like you guys are starting to place some of your answers. So 21 are almost all of them, 18, 10. So hopefully you're seeing that you can apply a lot of these standards to a unit in which you would create just from picking one topic and then looking through all of the bullets. You're going to use these. And then you're going to use them multiple times as you take each unit and you do different things. And what I'd like to show you guys as we go forward is just kind of how much, like resource-wise, how you can find so much, like a couple of resources that will kind of get you the most bang for your buck. So, oh, I'm so glad you guys could find a lot in there. That's fantastic. So when we talk again about our shifts, the big shifts that affect you guys at a K-6 level, really U.S. and world. World now has I think, a bigger focus, especially at the sixth grade level. Economics and personal finance is now taught throughout K-12 education. It's not just in the high school anymore. The big ones for you guys at this K-6 would be the fourth grade Arizona Studies moving from fourth to third, and then colonial content moving from fifth grade to fourth grade. And then we've kind of hit upon these a little bit already, but the idea that inquiry is embedded and the critical thinking is a big part of how the new standards are written. The progression from kindergarten up to a big, broader worldview, skill complexity increasing, and then the idea that the anchor standards are the overarching large idea, and then you've got your grade level specific standards, which are those, 5 dot, H dots, or HC dot 1.2 kind of thing. All right, so what I have here is I have a video that shows inquiry and shows it being used in a class. We are only going to watch about 4 to 5 minutes of it, but I want you guys to see exactly what inquiry kind of looks like at, this is, I believe it's a sixth grade class. So this is from the Department of Education in Georgia, and they show an inquiry, which I'm going to give you guys some of these resources and where you can find them to show you exactly how to do how to do inquiry and use them in your classes. Okay, we're going to stop the video there. And, whoops, where did that go? Let's see. Share screen 2. All right, so what that shows you is what inquiry has. Oh, whoops, there we go. What inquiry does and how to use it in a classroom. And this is where it integrates really well with your ELA reading and your ELA writing. So for example, here I have on the board, I have from kindergarten, first, second grade. These are already prepared canned inquiries that come from an organization called the C3 Teachers. And it's totally free. I will give you guys the information for them. But these are inquiries that fit with our specific standards. So for example, what makes holidays so special? Why can't we get everything we need and want? This is a great one that covers inquiry. And I just quickly went through these 2 inquiries, and they cover tons of standards, but these are like the big highlights. First grade, what do family stories tell us about the past? What choices do we make with our money? Again, especially if you don't know economics, these inquiries are fantastic. And essentially, just from doing these kinds of inquiries, which is just like what you saw on the video, you have kids reading, you have kids writing, they're annotating documents, they're also annotating pictures and videos. All of that is included in these pre-canned inquiries that are free. They are open source, so you can manipulate them as you want. You can take a piece of them or take all of it, whatever you can fit into your schedule, and that's what makes it so flexible. And Tammy and I were adding up, and if you did, especially at the lower elementary levels, you could do just 4 inquiries, do 1 a quarter, and you could cover pretty much all the social studies standards at least once or a couple of times. So here are some for the first and second, kindergarten, first, second grade. And then here are some for third, fourth, and fifth. So one thing I did want to point out, if you look at these, and I just kind of took a screenshot of them. For example, third grade is obviously Arizona Studies. So here's an inquiry off of C3 that talks about, is sharing and trading across cultures a good thing? So that totally fits with Arizona and trade. It can also be used in a 4th grade level, right, as we're talking about regions. And then here, why does New York have a state snack? Now, a couple things I want to point out about this. First of all, if you look, in New York, they do their state history in 4th grade. We do it obviously in 3rd grade. So when you are searching for these, I would say don't search by the grade level, search by the topic. And I'm going to show you guys the website and give you all those resources along with a PDF of the PowerPoint at the end of the presentation today. So search by topic, not by grade level. The other piece I wanted to point out is that this obviously says, does New York have a state snack? You can change this and adapt it to Arizona very easily. So for example, last year in the last legislative session, the state actually adopted an official drink of Arizona, and Arizona now has an official drink, and it's lemonade. We've never had it before, but it was actually a young man living here said, why don't we have an official drink like some of the other states? Proposed it, they ended up approving it, and so now we have a state drink. So that would be something that you could adapt the New York state snack to Arizona state drink and use that as a perfect inquiry. Here in 4th grade, talking about regions of the Americas, you can talk about sugar and slavery in the South. Again, this says 5th grade, but it absolutely applies to our 4th grade standards. Same thing with what makes a complex society complex. This talks all about the Incas and the Aztecs. It's a great inquiry to use. Here's another one for 5th grade, which gets more into U.S. studies. So why do countries declare independence? And then again, how did slavery shape my state? These all would bring in some of those multiple perspectives as well. And then last, I wanted to give you some 6th grade examples. So 6th grade here, what defines a people? This is talking about the ancient Hebrews, so that gets into that world religion. part of it, or that global studies part of it, and what was the development of agriculture, was it good for humans? And again, these are all of the standards, those bullets as you kind of scroll down into the standards that are covered with these inquiries. So as you're doing the inquiries, one thing I want you guys to be aware of is we definitely push primary source documents, but other things are primary sources as well. So you can use political cartoons, you can use artifacts, you can use paintings and images, you can use, here's a picture of Montezuma's castle, maps, here's a photograph of Geronimo and some Apache soldiers. So all of these are primary sources that kids can analyze and annotate and then use to make an argument in their classes. And a lot of time these can tie to whatever you happen to be reading for your ELA programs. So as we go forward implementing our new standards, we recognize that this year is kind of our transition year. So last year was the approval and kind of, hey, this is what they are, because they are a little different. So this year, the Department of Education would like for you to really start working on incorporating some of those inquiry skills, disciplinary skills and processes into your lessons. Gather resources, get them wherever you can, and I'll show you some great places to start. And then also attend professional developments like this to learn about inquiry and content as we go forward. And then lastly, full implementation should begin in the 2020-2021 school year and continue to engage in professional development and evaluate your lessons and gather more resources. Obviously, since there isn't a social studies test and there is no plan to make a social studies test for our state, that's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the fact that we are not required, and so that does give you a little bit of flexibility that if you're not quite fully implemented by day one of school year 2020 of the fall, there's wiggle room that way. It's also a curse because, again, social studies can get pushed to the side because of the high stakes testing in reading, writing, math, and then when the new science test that covers multiple grades, it's going to get real easy for social studies to get kind of lost in the weeds. So what we want to do is make sure that you have the skills and ability to really incorporate and use social studies as that vehicle to teach ELA or augment your ELA lessons. And it's not something where you're going to put away your English and take out your social studies. It'll be so interwoven that you won't really notice that much of a difference. So again, to kind of mind the gap, K1, 2 are really similar to what they were before as far as topics go, but third, fourth, fifth is where you see a lot of difference. So third grade, what we recommend is just to start teaching Arizona studies, and I'll show you some great places to get resources, or if you have a colleague that's a third grade teacher, I'll show them, let them know, and have them do as much Arizona studies as they can this year. Then for fourth grade teachers, teach some Arizona studies. Don't just totally ignore it, because obviously your fourth graders didn't have it last year. So do some Arizona studies and teach all of the Americas, talk about different Native Indigenous groups. The one thing in fourth grade that we really want to make sure that you cover is some Arizona studies, but also cover that colonial period of the American colonies. So those New England colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies, get that content in there, because fifth grade then starts after the colonies. So they need to have that background. So that's why we really recommend that fourth grade teachers teach the colonial period this year, even though it's this transition year. And then fifth graders, you start right away, boom, with the revolution in the 1760s. Then for sixth grade, just start teaching right away and get your global studies in the Eastern Hemisphere. So you're going to be looking at the Middle East, you're going to be looking at Africa, East Asia, Indian Ocean, Oceania. You'll do some Europe, but the key is that we don't want it to be a Western Civ focus. Again, getting kids to understand this broader world that they live in, and not just so Euro-focused. And then in 7th grade, to the globe, we add then the Americas and U.S. history. And so it still is a global studies world kind of course, but you now are bringing in U.S. history, and I do have some great resources for that if it, because it is a little confusing and it's not a U.S. history course. And then lastly is that 8th grade year where it's that capstone where we want to kind of channel that crazy energy for good and put it to good use for the kids and have them really act on some of the things that they've learned and that they're interested in and move on for that. So one thing I wanted to point out, and this should help, especially when you have to justify to administration, the fact that you need to teach social studies as well. We've gone out and for every level, K-12 actually, we have created a crosswalk that if you're teaching this ELA standard, you are also teaching these social studies standards. Or you could use this social studies content to teach these ELA standards. So for example, when you're reading literature in 4th grade, you're reading literature point 7, point 9, and point 10, that covers all these disciplinary skills and processes standards. It covers civic standards, economics, geography, and history standards. And then you can also use that social studies content to create great, rich, grade level appropriate literature. So we have all of those out there, and we have even put out included the ELP standards, the draft standards out there. So are social studies books a thing of the past? Definitely is not something that you have to have social studies books to teach these standards, which is, I think, fantastic. I think a book has a great place as a reference and a resource, but it's not something that you have to have like it was in the past. So integrating social studies and ELA, we are going to be putting out more trainings on this as we get into it. We just had one in October where we talk about integrating ELA and social studies, but there are some ideas as far as taking your reading program and seeing where the social studies standards can fit into the reading program, creating like a daily newscast, having a class timeline. You can also do a lot of role play with like ELA where you bring in some of the history, and it doesn't have to be elaborate where the kids are having these huge costumes and whatnot. I would do lots of role play with my middle school kids, and I do it even with my high school kids where I just stick a name badge on them and boom, now you are this person and that's what you are reacting to. A social studies word wall is another great, easy way to get into it. And then starting to create a good social studies library. And I'm going to show you where you can find all of this stuff on our website. One thing, since I started in June, I've really been trying to beef up our website to give resources to you guys that are available and user-friendly and vetted. So these are just some of them. All of these, when you get this, are hot linked. So the C3 teachers, if you click on this, when you get the PowerPoint, it's going to take you to the website, which I'm not sure why that just brought that up. Oh, it's bringing it up here. See here. I can show you. Let's see here. So these are all hot linked, but I did want to show you guys. Oh, here, I've got it over here. What this looks like. So this is the C3 inquiries. And again, these are all linked out here. And so this is what it looks like. It does ask you to join. It is free. I have belonged to most of the things that I've signed up for, most of the things out here that I'm going to show you resource-wise. I never get spam or anything like that. This is what you first get. So those inquiries that I showed you in the webinar, don't search by grade down here. Actually go to topic, and then you click on the topic and say you want to look at civics or something if that's what you're looking at. And then here you can scroll down. And so like here's a great one on civic ideals. So you click on this, and see here's the civic kindergarten one. It comes in a PDF, but it also comes in a document, like a Word doc that you can edit. So when you get this, you open up the PDF. Here's your overarching question. Here are supporting questions. Here it's got tasks for the kids to do, formative tasks. It has the resources here, so the documents are already out here that are great for you guys to use. It's got questions and then telling you where to find stuff. And so, for example, here's your picture of, what that would look like. Couple other things I just want to show you guys, because again, all of these on the slide here are out here. So if you come out to because we only have like 5 minutes left. If we come out here and you go to the Arizona Standards section and you click on Social Studies, I just want to show you where everything is so that way you can start to explore and find it. One, if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do. I send this out once a month and I always try to include resources, including K-12 resources. The recorded webinars, this is where today's webinar will be housed if anyone wants to see it. You've already been out to the grade levels at a glance, so these are your standards here. If you look at the implementation resources, this is something that I've gone through and created for you guys where I have put a PDF out here that has all of these resources listed. So here I've got the first grade, it's got the bullets here, the topics, and then as you scroll down, it has hyperlinks to all these different resources and how they apply. So for example, someone earlier had talked about getting stuff that is adapted for Lexiles. Sorry, I could not think for a minute. Newsela is a great resource for that. Another one, ReadWorks, is another good resource for that. And then there's another one. Let me see, I'm trying to think where it is. ReadWorks, Primary Source Nexus has some where you can actually adapt the Lexile levels. If you're thinking of building your library, this Notable Books here also has great resources. That's linked out here. The Econ ones are great for elementary schools. The Arizona Geographic Alliance has fantastic lessons especially for third grade. You can go out to the legacy portion, and that has it. Here is where you'll find the ELA, Social Studies, and ELP crosswalks. So this has got them for every grade level. So that way, if I pull up first grade here, you can say, okay, here's the reading literature standard for this. These are all the standards that hit social studies, and then this is some suggestions on what you can do to use social studies in those standards. Here's the informational text, the writing portion, and so this is where we've got these suggestions here for the ELP crosswalk. Let's see, I also wanted to show you resource-wise. So the progression standards, the professional development opportunities, you can click out here. And this has stuff that we're doing. You can just type in anything that, if you type in K12-AS.SS, that takes you to all of the social studies stuff. So if you know anyone that teaches middle school, we're having Big History come out for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for middle school. If you are interested in the Korean War, this is more for just like kind of your own edification kind of stuff. And then lastly, I've created, if I come back here to the website, this Wakelet. So this Wakelet and this link, if you click on it or use the QR code, it will take you to our website where I've got, let me just show you here, all of our professional development, because some of it is partnered with other groups and it is not, it's not necessarily through the Department of Education. And so if you click on that Wakelet, that will take you to, and I'm just going to show you here. Sorry, these are my other ones. Let's see, Fall Social Studies, Trainings and Events. So you click on that QR code or you scan it with your phone, that takes you out here. And then if you click on this link, this will show you all of the PD that we have going on with partner organizations, and everything out here is hot linked. So for here's the big history stuff. You can click on it, and that will take you to it. Webinars, when we do new webinars. Here we have training, Teenager's Guide. There's a Holocaust conference coming up in January. We've got some other stuff in December, and here's all our stuff in November. So we've got like a geonomics thing is also actually going on today. There's a summit, conference on volunteerism, Cold War. So check this out and look, because we do keep this updating it constantly, as well as signing up for the newsletter. So that was really quick. Any questions that anyone has before we sign off? Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. How this will work is tomorrow I will take attendance, and once I give you take attendance and record your attendance in the system, you can then get back into the Department of Ed system, and they will give you a link that you can print out your professional development for attending the webinar, as well as I will send you then the PDF version of this PowerPoint, and all of those things are hot linked at the end. But then you saw where you can go get the rest of those resources. So thank you guys so much for attending today and for being great participants. I really appreciate it. And please, again, feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. And that's it. Thank you. Have a good evening.